Okay, this video is called High Protein Diet and Old People. And the reason I talk about it is a lot of people on YouTube, for example, are recommending high protein diets for old people. I personally think this is a big mistake. I'll explain why. One of the things I've noticed is I've looked at some of the researchers. These are researchers from very famous hospitals that are known to be sort of in what I would call the paid-off club. I'm not going to say their names or where they're from, but if you study these subjects, you'll be familiar with them. And so basically, whenever I see them all getting together to promote something, it makes me more suspicious of it. They promote other products that are bogus. And, the big corporations wouldn't be paying these guys so much if they could just prove it based on available papers. When they have to pay the university scientists to get the papers done, that means that they can't generate the research on their own. Okay. High protein foods are usually high fat foods other than beans, so you're going to be probably eating a higher fat diet. If you get the protein from powders, the powders are usually high in heavy metals very often, so I would never take a powder food. Beans are, I think, still a good food, but one has to be careful with them. I wouldn't overconsume them. Animal protein has different amino acid composition than plant protein. It has more leucine and methionine. Those amino acids tend to be rate-limiting steps for activation of mTOR. mTOR is like a nutrient-sensing pathway, like a contractor, getting ready to build a building. Can't build till it has all the materials available. Again, it usually is waiting for having more leucine and methionine. Also iron, though, which is also more common in meats and processed foods with added iron, fortified with iron, so to speak. Anyways, that's thought to activate mTOR and accelerate cell replication. Cells only get about 60 divisions other than stem cells before they go into senescence and die. That's called reaching the Hayflick limit. Hayflick was a molecular biologist working with human tissue cultures, and he noticed that the human cells would only replicate about 60 times and die. It's because the DNA polymerase enzyme can't get to the end of the chromosome, so it shortens with each replication. And unless it can rebuild its telomeres, so it shortens with each replication and eventually shortens into genes that it needs to survive. Okay, methionine is one of the sulfur-containing amino acids. It's partially degraded to sulfuric acid, causes a low-grade metabolic acidosis. That leads to pH buffering with taking some calcium from the bones. You pee that out through your kidneys, so you pee your bones in the toilet, so to speak. More animal protein means more osteoporosis. Okay, I'm going to get at something though. There is some methionine in plant protein too. There's more in animal protein, but there's some in plant protein. TCC, T. Colin Campbell, he wrote the great book, The China Study, all about how higher intake of animal protein increases your risk of cancer and accelerates the rate of cancer growth. He was working with monosources of plant protein, and he said the monosources of plant protein, I think one was wheat, I think the other one was soy. He said they did not by themselves promote cancer growth. However, I wonder, how useful is that information? Let me explain. When you eat plants, you don't just eat one plant. You eat a variety of plants, and every plant has some of all the amino acids. So if you're eating a lot of beans and a bunch of other stuff, you're going to be getting a lot of protein. So, I think one should still be a little careful. McDougall recommended people limit their amount of beans to like 1 cup a day. Ruth Heidrich stopped eating beans when she had her cancer because she was concerned about the high amount of protein. So I limit my intake of beans to 1 cup a day or less. Usually I'll have probably about a half cup a day. And my total amount of protein per day nowadays is probably around 7 or 8%, maybe 8%, because everything else I eat is really low in protein. Okay, what else? Anything that glucose can do, glutamine can do. So glutamine is the most common amino acid in the body. It's sort of like the nitrogen transporter to deliver nitrogen to different cells for making amino acids to make proteins, also for making nucleotides, for making the genetic material, so to speak, in cancer. Cancer can run on glutamine. It can't survive on glucose alone, but it can survive on glutamine alone virtually because it can make fats out of that, it can make glucose out of that, it can make proteins out of that. Bottom line, cancer is about cell replication, and to prevent cancer, it's good to slow down cell replication. It's good to eat less protein. T. Colin Campbell had said animal protein causes increased blood cholesterol. Yeah, I think what happens is it has an anabolic effect on the body, and that causes the liver to mobilize cholesterol, to make more cholesterol, send it out in the blood for building cells and cell replication. We talked about protein powders having a high tendency to have heavy metals, like in the Consumer Reports. There's written, I think, like 3 papers on that. Caloric restriction increases longevity. We know that. We know that protein restriction increases longevity in all the animal studies. And we also know you can even get that, according to some, with methionine restriction alone, which is a lot easier. Caloric restriction sounds like starvation, but in reality, if you become a plant-based vegan, you probably just eat less calories and you'll be skinnier. But eating a low-fat diet also helps you to reduce your overall amount of calories. So what I'm trying to say is we know that protein restriction, there's good reason to believe it'll increase longevity in humans. So why would you want to tell old people to eat more protein, to make them live less long? Why would you want them eating all this protein? It can damage their kidneys potentially, puts a greater workload burden on the kidneys, potentially is activating mTOR to accelerate aging. I'm not buying it. To maintain their muscle strength, they can just lift weights and get some exercise. That's pretty easy to do. I'm just, I'm 62, and I get good strength, just from exercising. I had quite a low protein diet. I don't even know my exact amount. Again, probably about 7-8%. Let's see. Methionine restriction. Okay, higher plant diet might cause more osteoporosis. It probably would. Even if it's plants, all that protein, you're going to have more methionine on board, more sulfur. High protein foods tend to be high in fat. Things like nuts, seeds, and soy. These same foods tend to be high in advanced glycation products, advanced glycation end products, which can accelerate aging, cause inflammation, tissue damage. Bad. High protein diet, again, is a bigger burden for the kidneys. About 75% of what the kidneys do is excrete nitrogen. So you're increasing your risk of accelerating kidney failure. Tons of old people have mild kidney failure, tons of them. Doctors Kempner, McDougall, and Epidemiology Health diets that had incredibly good results for promoting health were low in protein. So anyways, that's why I do not recommend high protein for old people. Hope that was helpful.